My daughter-in-law pushed my son and me off a cliff. Lying among the rocks, with blood streaming down my face, I heard my son whisper, "Don't move. Pretend you're already dead." When she was gone, my son told me a secret, even more terrible than the fall. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where you're listening to my revenge story from. I want to know how far it's reached. The air at the top of the Grand Canyon was both pure and harsh. The sun poured down like melted honey on the steep trail, while the wind blew hard, whipping against my skin until it burned. I was with my son and his wife, the three of us determined to conquer one of America's most beautiful trails. Isabella, my daughter-in-law, waved me over. "Mom, stay right here. I'm going to capture the whole sky for you in one picture." Her voice was clear, her smile as bright as the morning sun, and just like that, all my worries melted away. Isabella pointed to a ledge that jutted out over the abyss, where the majesty of the Grand Canyon unfolded. So beautiful it took my breath away. I felt a chill as I looked down into the endless drop, where the jagged rocks looked like giant fangs ready to devour anyone who slipped. But Isabella's smile, the sparkle in her eyes, made me believe everything was fine. I trusted her, just as I had always trusted in the happy family I had spent so many years building. I walked toward the rock, my old camera in hand, a gift from Albert, my husband, for my 50th birthday. It wasn't expensive, but to me it held a universe of memories. I smiled, looking for the best angle to capture the moment, imagining that one day I'd be sitting by the fireplace, flipping through the photos one by one, telling my grandkids all about their grandma's trip. But suddenly, everything shattered, so fast I didn't understand what was happening. Julian, my son, suddenly lunged forward, his voice urgent and full of panic. "Mom, get back!" I jumped and turned. He was gripping Isabella's hand tightly, his face red and his eyes filled with fear and rage. The camera slipped from my fingers, rolled off the rock and smashed to pieces. The glass shattered with a sharp crack, like a warning, echoing in the mountain silence. "Are you crazy? Let go of me!" Isabella screamed, struggling to break free from Julian's grip. She thrashed wildly, her long hair whipping in the wind, and a flash of anger I had never seen before appeared in her eyes. Julian wouldn't let go. He squeezed her wrist tighter, his voice trembling but firm. "No, Isabella, don't you do it!" I just stood there stunned, my heart pounding in my chest. What was wrong with my kids? Why were they fighting right on the edge of a cliff? I ran toward them, desperate. "What's going on? Stop it right now!" My voice broke, not from exhaustion but from the terror choking me. I placed my hand on Isabella's shoulder, trying to calm her down like a mother does. But in that moment, everything fell apart. Isabella spun around so fast I couldn't react. Her eyes no longer held a trace of warmth, only a chilling coldness. With a strong, sudden shove, she threw both Julian and me toward the edge of the precipice. I heard my own scream mixed with Julian's as it was swallowed by the wind. The world turned upside down. My body felt weightless, suspended in the air before plummeting into the abyss. The whistle of the wind in my ears was like a death song, pulling me into the darkness. The impact against a thick bush stunned me. My body rolled several times over sharp rocks, and each hit tore at my flesh. Pain spread through my entire being, from my shoulders and back down to my fingertips. A trickle of warm blood ran down my forehead, slid over my eyes and blurred my vision. I lay there motionless, my breathing shallow, my heart beating so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. I didn't know if I was alive or dead, only that everything around me was a thick fog. A few feet away, Julian also lay still, his body curled up in the weeds. I wanted to call his name, to run and hold him, but my body wouldn't respond. Pain and fear had me pinned down. A few seconds later, I saw Julian move slightly. He crawled toward me, breathing hard, his weak breath brushing against my ear. His voice came out in broken whispers, but they were full of urgency. "Mom, don't move. Pretend you're dead." I didn't understand. My mind was spinning. Everything was chaos. Why did I have to pretend to be dead? What was happening? But Julian's gaze, though blurry in the dim light, had a firmness that left no room for argument. I held my breath and stayed perfectly still, fighting the shivers that ran through me from the pain and fear. The blood kept flowing, soaking my clothes, making my body cold. But I didn't dare move or speak. I just obeyed my son. Minutes later, Isabella's heels clicked against the dry stones, echoing from the slope above. Each step was like a hammer blow to my heart. She leaned down, and her icy hand shook my shoulder hard. I gritted my teeth, keeping my body limp even as the pain tore through me. I felt her breath so close it made my skin crawl. Then she turned Julian's body over, checking him with the same coldness. When she saw we weren't reacting, she let go and stood up. Through the sliver of my eyelids, I saw her exhale in relief, and a faint smile appeared on her face, like someone who'd just lifted a heavy weight off their shoulders. Isabella turned away and pulled out her phone. Her voice was sharp, emotionless. "It's done. No one will suspect a thing. It was just a tragic accident." Those words were like an ice-cold knife stabbing me in the chest. I wanted to scream, to lunge at her, to demand answers. But Julian's eyes held me, pleading for silence. I bit my lip until it bled, and my tears mixed with the blood, running silently down my face. When Isabella's silhouette disappeared behind the rocks, Julian turned to me. His eyes were red, filled with pain and hatred. He murmured in a shaky voice, "Mom, the truth is, Dad didn't die in an accident. It was her." His words hit me like a bolt of lightning. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt like it was being crushed. Albert, the man I had loved for decades, the man I had built a lifetime of happiness with, hadn't died in an accident. He had been murdered by the daughter-in-law I had loved so much. I wanted to scream, to demand an explanation, but Julian put a finger to his lips, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Shh, she might still be close. There, at the bottom of that freezing canyon, suspended between life and death. I heard the wind howl between the rocks like a lament, in time with the frantic beating of my heart." Julian's accusation hung in the air, revealing a truth more terrifying than the fall itself. But in that fragile moment, the memories came flooding back, pulling me into the bright days of the past, like a movie in slow, painful motion. I saw myself in my youth, just a 20-year-old girl in Austin. Back then, I was just a young seamstress, working quietly behind the scenes of a glamorous fashion show. The stage lights shone on the elegant models, while I, with hands calloused by the needle, carefully adjusted every stitch on a wine-red evening gown. The smell of new fabric, the hum of the sewing machine, and the backstage hustle, that was my entire world. I didn't dare dream of the spotlight. I just wanted to do my job well so I could send money back to my mother in my hometown. It was in a quiet moment like that when Albert approached. He was young, tall, with a kind smile that lit up that dark corner. "Your hands are truly magical, Maria," he said, his voice as warm as the summer sun. "One day, everyone will know your name." I looked down, blushing, not knowing what to say. For a poor girl like me, that compliment felt like an impossible dream. But Albert's gaze, full of sincerity and passion, made me feel like I was truly worth something. Our love grew from casual encounters among piles of fabric and long nights of work. Albert wasn't just a talented designer. He was the man who always believed in my dreams. We would spend hours sitting with a cup of black coffee in a small cafe, sketching designs to create our own fashion brand. "Casa de Sol," Albert said, his eyes shining. "The house of the sun. It will be where we pour our heart and soul." I nodded, my heart pounding, even though I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The early days of our business were exhausting. We rented a small shop on the outskirts of Austin, which served as our workshop, our showroom, and the place where we personally helped every customer. There were nights I went without sleep, sewing wedding dresses until my fingers bled, just to have enough money to pay the rent. Albert ran all over town looking for partners, convincing everyone to trust in our vision. One time he came back soaked from the rain, but with a radiant smile. "They agreed to order the first batch of dresses, Maria. We're going to make it. I remember the nights he would hold me amidst piles of fabric, whispering, "Everything's going to be okay. Maria, our Casa de Sol will shine." Those words were like medicine to me. Together, we overcame the hard times step by step, turning Casa de Sol from a dream into a reality. Our first collection started to get noticed, and little by little, the name Casa de Sol became a symbol of elegance and creativity in Austin. I still remember the afternoon we signed the contract to buy our first large home. Albert held my hand tightly, his eyes filled with pride. "We did it, my love." I rested my head on his shoulder, tears falling silently, not from sadness, but from overwhelming happiness. Years later, that joy multiplied with the arrival of Julian. The boy was the light of our lives. The house, though luxurious, only became a true home when Julian's crystal-clear laughter echoed in every room. I remember our family dinners, Albert telling jokes and Julian with his chubby cheeks, trying to imitate his father's voice. Those moments, simple yet full of warmth, were my most precious treasure. Julian grew up to be a tall, strong young man, but he still had his father's kindness and gentleness. When he brought Isabella home to meet us, she won me over from the very first moment. Isabella arrived in a flawless white dress, her long hair wavy, and a smile as clear as morning light. "I promise I'll take good care of Julian for you, Mom," she said with a sweet voice, bowing her head respectfully. Those words melted my heart. I looked at her and saw a reflection of myself in the days I first met Albert, a young woman full of excitement and love. I thought that, at last, my family was truly complete. Julian and Isabella's wedding was held in the rose-filled garden of our home. Under the twinkling lights of the fireworks, I stood beside Albert, watching our children exchange rings, my heart overflowing with happiness. I took my husband's hand and whispered, "See, we've built a wonderful family." Albert smiled and squeezed my hand tightly. "It's all thanks to you, Maria." That night, as everyone raised their glasses for a toast, I thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. I had a talented husband, a brilliant career, a dutiful son, and now a kind daughter-in-law. The image of our family gathered together, the laughter and voices filling our warm home, was like a perfect painting. But now, lying at the bottom of the cold canyon, I understood with bitter clarity that all that happiness was just a perfect facade for a plan that had been planted long ago. There, in the depths of the Grand Canyon, amidst the icy whistle of the wind, I felt my heart clench as I remembered the morning I lost Albert. That day, the sky over Austin was gray, and the rain fell as if it wanted to drown the entire world. I was in bed, exhausted from a lingering fever. My head was spinning, my voice hoarse, as I held Albert's hand and tried to apologize. "I'm sorry, honey, I can't go with you this time." He just smiled with that same kind expression that had made me fall in love with him from the start. He leaned in, gently stroking my hair with his warm hand, and murmured, "Rest, Maria. I'll take care of everything. I'll be back soon with that chicken soup you love." His words, as tender as a ray of sun breaking through the rain, made me smile weakly, though a vague sense of unease lingered inside me. Albert was getting ready to go to Dallas to sign an important contract, a decisive step for Casa de Sol, the fashion brand we had built together from scratch. He was wearing the navy blue coat I had sewn for him myself, and he still looked as handsome as ever. From my bed I watched him, trying to hide my worry. "Be careful," I whispered weakly. He nodded and left a soft kiss on my forehead before heading to the door. Julian, our son, walked him to the entrance. I overheard him as he handed over the car keys, his tone full of concern. "Dad, the roads are slick. Drive carefully." From my room, I also heard Isabella's voice, sweet as always. "Be safe, Dad. It's easy to have an accident in this rain." I smiled, thinking how lucky I was to have such a caring daughter-in-law. But in an instant, when I looked up, my eyes met Isabella's through the crack in the door. It was only for a second, but her gaze was cold, sharp, like a knife piercing my chest. I shook my head, telling myself I was just being sensitive because of the fever. I didn't know then that her look was a prelude to the tragedy about to unfold. The sound of Albert's car engine faded into the distance, mixing with the rain. I pulled the blanket tighter, trying to sleep to chase away the uneasy feeling that was weighing on my chest. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, images of Albert filled my mind, his smile, and the memories of everything we had been through together. I remembered the first time he held my hand, leading me through a night market in Austin just to buy me a cheap bracelet I liked. I remembered the nights he would sit beside me, sketching designs while I sewed, as we both dreamed of the day Casa de Sol would be famous. Those memories, though warm, only heightened my anxiety, as if I sensed something terrible was about to happen. That afternoon, the ringing of the phone shattered my thoughts. I sat up abruptly, my hands trembling as I picked it up. A stranger's shaky voice came through the line. "Excuse me, is this Mr. Albert's residence?" He's been in an accident." The teapot I was holding slipped from my hands, crashing to the floor, the broken shards tearing through the silence. I don't remember what I screamed, only that my world collapsed in that instant. "No, it can't be," I stammered, my voice breaking, as if denying it could change reality. I ran out of the house, not caring about the fever or the pouring rain. Julian followed me, holding my hand tightly, trying to keep me steady. When we arrived at the scene, the sight left me breathless. Albert's car was mangled, smashed against the side of a hill, with smoke spiraling from the wreckage. A white sheet covered his body, a cruel declaration that the man I loved most was gone forever. I screamed, collapsing onto the wet ground, clinging to a nearby police officer's hand. "It can't be. He always drove so carefully. How could this have happened?" The officer shook his head, his voice full of sympathy. "The brakes were damaged, ma'am. It was a very unfortunate accident." Those words were a knife straight to my heart. Damaged brakes? Albert, who always meticulously checked the car before every trip, how could he have let something like that happen? But I didn't have the strength to think. The pain consumed me, and all I could do was hold on to Julian and weep uncontrollably in my son's arms. Isabella was by my side, her arms around me, whispering words of comfort. "Mom, be strong. Dad is at peace now." I collapsed into her embrace, soaking her shoulder with my tears. In that moment, I was grateful for her presence, believing she was my support in the midst of this unbearable loss. But now, from the depths of despair, remembering that scene, I realized how cold her comforting voice sounded, as if it were all part of a perfectly executed performance. Albert's funeral was held in quiet sorrow. The mansion, once filled with laughter, was now covered in white lilies. I stood in front of my husband's photo, the candlelight illuminating his face, with that same kind smile he always had. But he was gone. I was a lost soul trapped in regret. If only I had stopped him that morning, I murmured, my tears falling endlessly. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Albert waving goodbye before getting into the car, with a smile that seemed to promise he would return. But he never came back. Julian hugged me tightly, sobbing, "Mom, from now on I'll carry the weight for Dad." My son's words only deepened my pain. He was barely 30. How could he support a whole family and the company Albert had left behind? I squeezed Julian's hand, searching for some comfort in my son's arms. Behind me, Isabella stood silently, placed her hand on our shoulders and said softly, "Mom, Julian, we'll get through this together." I nodded, feeling a little warmth in her concern. I believed that even though I had lost Albert, I still had Julian and Isabella. I still had a family to hold on to. After Albert's death, our enormous mansion suddenly felt cold and empty. The walls that once echoed with laughter now held only a suffocating silence. I spent the following days like a shadow, walking soullessly through rooms filled with memories. Every corner reminded me of Albert. The armchair where he used to read, the dining table where he told jokes, and even the small sewing workshop in the garden, where we once sketched our dreams together. I no longer had the strength to go on. I just sank into grief and emptiness. There were nights I would sit in front of his portrait, the candlelight illuminating his face, and cry until I couldn't breathe. "Why did you leave me, Albert?" I'd whisper, but only silence answered. In the midst of that infinite loneliness, Isabella appeared like a small light in the darkness. She started to care for me more, with a sweetness and attentiveness that touched me. In the mornings, she would bring me a bowl of hot chicken soup, placing it in front of me with a gentle smile. "Mom, eat a little. Don't let yourself waste away." The warm, comforting aroma of the soup seemed to soothe my broken heart. She would sit beside me, hold my hand, and tell me stories from Julian's childhood, trying to make me laugh. One time, she even cleaned the entire house herself, dusting the picture frames and organizing the rolls of fabric in the workshop I had long abandoned. "Mom, you have to take care of your health," she told me with a sincere look. "I'll be here, taking care of you as if you were my own mother." Those words made me cry. I hugged Isabella, feeling her warmth as a final refuge in the storm of my loss. "Thank you, my dear," I whispered, my tears soaking her shoulder. "I'm so lucky to have you." At that moment, I truly believed that Isabella was a gift sent by fate to comfort me, to help me and Julian cope with our pain. I was too blind to realize that behind that smile was a cold, calculated plan. But slowly I started to notice strange things. Isabella's conversations, though they began with trivial topics, always ended up revolving around money and property. One afternoon, as she was peeling an apple for me, she said softly, "Mom, this house is too big, and now there are only 3 of us. Why don't we sell it and put the money in the bank to be safer? That way you wouldn't have to worry about anything." I froze, looking at her. The thought of selling the mansion, the place that held all my memories with Albert, made my heart ache, but her eyes still looked so clear, as if she was genuinely thinking of my well-being. I nodded and smiled faintly. "I'll think about it, dear." Another time, while we were organizing the old sewing workshop together, Isabella said again with a caring voice, "The Casa de Sol brand is well established now, right, Mom? Just leave everything to us, so you can rest and take care of your health. You deserve a break after so many years of hard work." Those words startled me. Casa de Sol wasn't just a brand, it was my and Albert's life's passion. Handing it over to others, even if it was Julian and Isabella, felt like giving up a piece of my soul. But I tried to calm myself, thinking that maybe she was just worried about my health. "You're right," I replied, trying to hide my unease. "But I still want to be involved a little, so I don't feel useless." Isabella smiled and took my hand. "Don't say that, Mom. You're my inspiration." Those sweet words softened me again, making me believe she truly cared. I didn't know that her every word, her every gesture, was a calculated step in a larger scheme. One night, when I felt the mansion was too heavy with memories of Albert, I suggested, "What if we go away for a few days, for a change of scenery?" Isabella's eyes lit up as if she had been waiting for that idea all along. "What a great idea, Mom!" she exclaimed, clapping her hands. "We can go to the mountains. The fresh air is great for your health. I know a beautiful spot in the Grand Canyon. You're going to love it." Her enthusiasm was contagious, and it gave me a little hope. Maybe a trip would help us forget the pain for a while and bring us closer as a family. Isabella immediately took care of everything, from booking the lodge to planning the itinerary. She was meticulous with every detail, even checking the weather to make sure the trip would be perfect. I watched her bustling around and felt a huge sense of gratitude. "She's such a wonderful daughter-in-law," I told my neighbor, Mrs. Davis, when she came to visit. "Isabella loves me so much. She even planned a family trip all by herself." Mrs. Davis smiled kindly and patted my shoulder. "You're very lucky to have a daughter-in-law like that, Maria." I nodded, smiling, proud that my family could still find warm moments in the midst of our grief. But now, at the bottom of the canyon, remembering Isabella's cold gaze, a shiver ran down my spine as I realized that all her devotion was just a sham. The image of her tenderly feeding me soup, her soft voice comforting me, merged with the image of her checking to see if Julian and I were dead before turning and walking away without a second thought. The contrast was so cruel it left me breathless. I squeezed Julian's cold hand and whispered in a shaky voice, "I've been so blind, son." But just when I thought I couldn't take another blow, Julian moved slightly, his faint breath brushing against my ear. "Mom, I have to tell you the truth." His voice trembled, each word draining the little strength he had left. I squeezed his hand, my heart pounding, preparing myself to hear an even more terrible truth. Julian, his eyes red, began to speak, and every word was like a hammer blow to my chest. He told me about the long nights after Albert's death, when the darkness not only covered the mansion but also seeped into his soul. "After Dad died," Julian murmured, his voice cracking with pain, "I started noticing strange things about Isabella. He said there were nights he would wake up startled by his wife's sleep-talking. Isabella would be lying next to him, drenched in sweat, muttering disconnected phrases. The brakes. Straight into the ravine. Then she would jolt upright, soaked as if she had just escaped a nightmare. Julian told me that one time she hugged him tightly in the middle of the night, her voice trembling. "It was just an accident, honey. I didn't do it on purpose." But the next morning, when he asked her about it, Isabella would just laugh coldly and deny it. "You dreamed that?" I didn't say anything. Her eyes, though still clear, had a shifty glint that started to fill him with unease. At the time, Julian just thought his wife was haunted by his father's tragic death. "I didn't want to hurt her anymore," he said, his voice full of regret. "I thought maybe she was suffering too, just like you and me." He tried to push his doubts aside, convincing himself that Isabella, the sweet wife he loved, couldn't possibly be involved in something so terrible. But the suspicion kept growing, like a shadow creeping into his mind that he couldn't shake. One afternoon, when Isabella went out to meet a friend, Julian did something he never thought he would do. "I don't know what pushed me, Mom," he murmured, his expression tormented. "But I felt like I had to find out." He checked the drawer of Isabella's desk, where she usually kept personal papers. Among bills and unimportant letters, he found a small notebook with a worn leather cover, as if it had been used for a long time. His hands trembled as he opened it, and his heart stopped when he read the crooked words written inside. "The brakes are weak. All it takes is one hard press." Julian said that in that instant he felt his blood run cold. Those few words, short but sharp, were like a silent confession. He immediately tore out the page, stuffed it in his pocket, and carefully put the notebook back, his heart pounding in his chest. "I didn't know what to do, Mom," he said, his voice choked. "I wanted to run to her, to scream at her and demand the truth. But I was scared that if it was true, I wouldn't be able to handle it." For months after that, Julian lived in torment. He said that every time he looked into Isabella's eyes, he saw the gentle woman he had loved, but at the same time, the words from that notebook were like a knife twisting in his mind. "I wondered if I was misinterpreting it," he said, tears rolling down his cheeks. "I convinced myself that maybe it was just a meaningless note, that Isabella couldn't do something like that. But deep down, I knew something was wrong." He chose to stay silent, not because he didn't want to confront her, but because he was afraid the truth would destroy everything. Our family, and my trust, as I had already lost my husband and was drowning in grief. I listened as tears streamed down my face, mixing with the dried blood. "Oh God, my Albert," I whispered, my voice broken with anguish. The image of my husband appeared before me, his kind smile, his warm hands, and the dreams we had built together. The thought that he hadn't died in an accident, but had been taken from me by the very woman I had considered a daughter, tore my soul apart. I squeezed Julian's hand, my nails digging into his skin, as if trying to hold on to one last shred of hope. "Why didn't you tell me sooner, son?" I asked, my voice trembling, not to blame him, but because the pain was too much to bear. Julian shook his head, his gaze firm but filled with remorse. "I'm sorry, Mom," he murmured. "I was afraid you wouldn't be able to take it. I was afraid I wouldn't be able to face the truth myself. I tried to hold on to the image of the wife I loved, but..." He paused, took a deep breath, and continued in a harder voice. "Mom, that's not all. There's something else, something even more terrible." Julian told me that on our first night in the mountain cabin he couldn't sleep a wink. "I don't know why, Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking at the memory. But I had this dark feeling in my gut, like I knew something awful was about to happen. At midnight, when the only sounds were the whistling wind and the chirping of insects, Julian quietly stepped out onto the balcony of their small lodge room. He said he just wanted to breathe in some of the cold mountain air, hoping to shake off the sense of dread that was crushing him. But then, through the thin wall of the next room, he heard Isabella's hushed voice. It was rushed, cruel, with no trace of the tenderness I once knew. "Tomorrow, when we're hiking up the mountain, I'm going to push her," she said in an icy tone. "We'll just say she slipped. In a few months, it'll be Julian's turn." Julian said that in that instant, he felt his heart stop. He hid in a dark corner, holding his breath, straining to hear every word. With a trembling hand, he pulled out his phone and hit the record button, hoping to save proof of what was happening. "I couldn't believe it, Mom," he said, tears streaming down his cheeks. "The wife I love, the woman I dreamed of starting a family with, was planning to kill my mother and me." His voice broke, as if just saying it was enough to tear him apart. Isabella's conversation continued, each sentence a stab to Julian's heart. She said firmly, "No one will suspect a thing. Accidents are always the best way. I'll get Julian to walk away, then I'll lure the old woman close to the edge. She won't suspect a thing." On the other end of the line, a man's deep voice, who Julian assumed was Isabella's father, replied. "You have to be sure," the man said, his tone demanding. "There's no turning back for our family now." Isabella answered without hesitation, "I know. When she dies, Julian will be the sole heir. Then I'll take care of the rest. All of Casa de Sol will be ours." Julian said that when he heard those words, he felt his world collapse. He crept back to his room, locked the door, and sank to the floor, gasping for air. "I wanted to break down her door, to confront her right then and there," he said, his voice thick with rage. "But I was scared, Mom. Scared that if she knew I'd hurt her, she'd act immediately, and I wouldn't be fast enough to protect you." He buried his head in his hands, sobbing on the cold wooden floor. The phone with that fateful recording was the only thing he could cling to, a faint ray of hope that the truth would come out. The next morning, Isabella woke up with a radiant smile as if nothing had happened. She made breakfast and placed a plate of toast and a steaming cup of coffee in front of me. "Mom, honey, let's get going," she exclaimed with a chilling cheerfulness. "The day is beautiful. It would be a waste not to go out." I remember that moment when she handed me the coffee cup with a smile as sweet as the morning light. "Drink up, Mom, it'll warm you up." "It's cold on the mountain," she said, her eyes sparkling. I smiled, grateful for her apparent care, never imagining that her smile was actually a death sentence. Julian, despite knowing everything, couldn't act right away. "I tried to stay calm, Mom," he whispered, his voice full of remorse. "I was afraid that if I said anything, she'd do something crazy. I just wanted to protect you, to find a way to get you out of there safely." He silently kept the phone with the recording in his pocket, hoping it would be the evidence that would save us. But he never imagined that Isabella's plan would move so quickly and that we wouldn't be able to escape our cruel fate. In my delirium, between stabs of pain, I saw the flicker of a flashlight in the darkness. That light, faint but steady, was like a promise that we still had a chance. With my last bit of strength, I croaked out, "Is anyone there? Please, help us!" My call was lost in the whistling wind, so weak I feared the night would swallow it. But then a figure appeared, a thin old man wrapped in an old coat, with a small dog barking non-stop at his side. He froze when he saw our bloody bodies lying motionless in the brush and rocks. "My God, are you still alive?" the man murmured, his voice trembling. He knelt, checking my and Julian's wounds with skilled but shaky hands. I tried to open my eyes, but the pain blurred everything. I barely felt him lift us onto a rustic cart, tied to the back of an old donkey. The echo of the barking, the smell of pine resin, and the murmur of his prayers were the last things I remembered before I passed out. When I woke up, I was in a small wooden hut with a strong smell of bitter herbs. The dim light of a lantern illuminated Julian's face, lying next to me, carefully bandaged. The wound on his forehead was still red, but his breathing was calmer. I tried to sit up, but a sharp pain in my shoulder made me groan. The old man sitting by the fire turned to me. Relief shone in his kind eyes. "You're awake," he said in a warm voice. "My name is Matthew. I was an army medic. You two were very lucky. It's all rocks around here, but you landed right on a patch of thick grass. If not..." He trailed off and shook his head. I squeezed Julian's hand, tears welling up as I saw him alive. "Thank you, sir," I whispered, my voice breaking. "If it weren't for you, we..." I couldn't finish the sentence, just held him tighter, feeling his fragile warmth. Matthew told us he had been living in seclusion in the mountains for years, with his dog as his only companion. He found us while gathering herbs, and though he didn't have many resources, he did everything he could to save us. "I don't know what happened to you," he said, his eyes full of compassion, "but I saw the strength in your eyes. Don't give up." For the next 2 days, Matthew cared for us with incredible dedication. He brewed herbal concoctions, changed our bandages, and told us stories of the mountains to distract us from the pain. I watched him with deep gratitude, but at the same time, the fire of hatred for Isabella burned stronger than ever. She had pushed us into the abyss and walked away with a cold smile. But we didn't die, and I swore I wouldn't let her take everything from me. After 2 days, when our wounds hurt less and we had the strength to move, an acquaintance of Matthew's, an old truck driver, came to take us to the nearest town hospital. The rickety truck rattled along the bumpy mountain road, but I no longer felt fear. I looked at Julian, saw a glint of determination in his eyes, and knew we had been given a second chance. At the hospital, the doctors were shocked by our condition. "You and your son are truly lucky," one doctor said, his voice full of amazement. "These injuries should have been much more severe." I nodded, but inside, I knew it wasn't just luck. It was the will to survive. It was a promise to Albert that I wouldn't let betrayal win. Julian and I slowly recovered, though every step was still painful. The scars on my body were a reminder that we had been on the brink of death, but they were also proof of our strength. Once I was strong enough, I borrowed Julian's phone and created a new social media account under a fake name. I wanted to see what Isabella was up to watch her believe she had won. But what I found made my blood boil. On her profile, there wasn't a single word about my and Julian's accident. Instead, there were photos of her at a spa, shopping for designer clothes, and partying at lavish bars. She was laughing, dressed in expensive outfits, the designs of Casa de Sol, the life's work of Albert and me. "She's living as if we never existed," I told Julian, my voice trembling with rage. I went to the Casa de Sol website, and an announcement hit me like a punch to the gut. "We are honored to invite you to the ceremony announcing the new owner of the Casa de Sol brand next week." I threw the phone on the bed, my hands shaking. "Do you see, Julian?" I growled, tears streaming down my face. The moment we were gone, she took everything. "Casa de Sol, your father's dream and mine, and she dares to call herself the owner." Julian clenched his fists, his eyes burning with anger. "Mom, she thinks we're dead," he said in a firm voice. "But she's wrong. It's time to fight back." He reached into his pocket and checked the phone with the recording, the only proof we had to unmask Isabella. I looked at him and saw Albert's strength in his eyes, and a fire of determination ignited within me. After leaving the hospital, Julian and I didn't go back to the mansion that held only betrayal. Every corner of that house, from the rose garden to the little sewing workshop, was tainted with pain and lies. I felt my heart ache thinking about the past, but the flame inside me burned brighter than ever. We were no longer helpless victims. We were survivors, and I swore that Isabella would pay for everything she had done. We went to the home of Miller, the Austin chief of police and Albert's closest friend. The journey to Miller's house was rough, but every step I took felt newly determined. Julian walked beside me, his gaze icy and the phone clutched in his hand, our only evidence to expose Isabella. When we knocked, Miller opened the door, and the moment he saw us, his eyes widened, his face turning pale, as if he'd seen a ghost. "My God, Maria, Julian!" he exclaimed, his voice shaking. "Isabella told me you two died in a hiking accident when I ran into her on the street a few days ago. How did you survive?" I sat down on the old armchair in Miller's living room, the exhaustion and pain still throbbing in my body. "If it weren't for a kind person who helped us, we might not be here," I answered, my voice breaking, trembling, as I remembered the image of old Matthew rescuing us from the bottom of the canyon. I told Miller about the horrific fall, about the moment we pretended to be dead to escape Isabella's cold gaze, and about the help from Matthew, the mountain hermit. Every word I spoke reopened the wound in my heart, but I couldn't stop. The truth had to come out. Julian remained silent beside me, his eyes filled with contained rage. He didn't say much, just handed his phone to Miller and played the recording. Isabella's cruel voice echoed in the room like a knife slicing through the air. "Tomorrow when we're hiking up the mountain, I'm going to push her. We'll just say she slipped. In a few months, it'll be Julian's turn." Miller, a seasoned officer who had seen countless cases, couldn't hide his shock. He sank into his chair, his trembling hands holding the phone, his expression darkening. "My God," he muttered angrily, slamming his fist on the table. "This is a premeditated murder plot." I took a deep breath, holding back tears as I recounted my past suspicions. I reminded him of the coldness in Isabella's eyes the morning Albert left, her calculated words about the properties and Casa de Sol. Julian silently pulled a piece of paper from his pocket, torn from Isabella's notebook with the crooked letters. "The brakes are weak. All it takes is one hard press." I looked at Miller, my voice trembling. "She didn't just want to kill me and Julian. She killed Albert. Miller, the man I loved, your best friend, was taken by the daughter-in-law I once considered my own." Miller examined the paper and listened to the recording again. His eyes grew as sharp as a razor. He stood up, pacing back and forth, his fists clenched. "Maria," he said firmly, "I give you my word. I will get justice for Albert and for both of you. She will not get away with this." He stopped and looked at Julian and me. "But we need a plan to catch her in a situation she can't escape from." We sat around the small table in Miller's house, the dim light illuminating our determined faces. Miller laid out a bold plan. We would remain dead to Isabella and the world. No one except him was to know we were alive. "She's drunk on her false victory," he said in a grave voice. "She thinks you're dead and that she'll soon own Casa de Sol. We're going to let her dig her own grave." Julian nodded, determination shining in his eyes. "We'll show up right when she declares herself the new owner of Casa de Sol," he said firmly. "That's when she won't be able to deny it." I looked at my son, saw Albert's strength in his features, and felt a new energy rise within me. "The day she thinks she's won will be the day of her ruin," I declared, my voice no longer trembling. Miller nodded, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Maria, I promise you, we will make her pay." Miller began to gather more information. He called a few trusted colleagues, asking them to discreetly monitor Isabella's every move. He also re-examined the file on Albert's death, looking for details the police might have missed. "I'm going to review the report on Albert's accident again," he said, his gaze sharp. "If the car's brakes were really tampered with, there will be evidence. And with this recording, we have enough to charge her." In the days that followed, Julian and I stayed at Miller's house, hidden in the shadows, like ghosts waiting for our moment. Every night, I lay in the small guest bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking of Albert. I remembered his smile, his gentle voice telling me, "Everything's going to be okay, Maria." But now, without him by my side, I had to be strong for myself. I whispered to myself, "Albert, I won't let you die in vain. I will protect what we built together." Julian changed, too. He was no longer the naive young man who had blindly loved Isabella. Every day I saw him sitting in silence, listening to the recording, his expression full of rage, but also determination. "Mom," he told me one night as we watched the moon from the window, "I will not forgive her. Not just for Dad, but for everything she did to you, to our family." I took his hand, tears falling silently. "Son, we will do this," I replied firmly. "Together we will get everything back." Miller became our indispensable ally. He wasn't just a police chief. He was a friend who had shared many glasses of tequila with Albert on long nights. "Albert was the best man I ever knew," he said, his voice heavy with sadness. "I will not let his killer go unpunished." He picked up the case file, his eyes burning with resolve. In front of him, Julian and I, once grieving victims, had transformed into hunters, ready for the final battle. On the day of the announcement of Casa de Sol's new owner, I sat in the darkness of a discreetly parked car across from the lavish event hall. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from the flame of determination that had been burning inside me for days. Beside me, Julian squeezed my hand, his gaze icy, while Miller, Albert's loyal friend, reviewed the arrest warrant in his hands. We had waited for this moment, the moment the truth would be revealed, and Isabella, the traitor, would have to pay for her crimes. The hall was spectacularly decorated, crystal chandeliers sparkling over large banners bearing the Casa de Sol logo, the legacy Albert and I had spent our lives building. The guests, from journalists and business partners to well-known figures in the fashion industry, filled the room, eager for the highly publicized event. From the car, I saw Isabella step out of a luxury Mercedes, wearing a stunning red dress, my most prized design, which I had stitched together piece by piece to give her on her wedding day. She held her head high, smiling for the crowd of cameras, playing the role of a successful businesswoman to perfection. Seeing that smile made my blood boil. "She's wearing our dream," I muttered to Julian, my voice trembling with rage. The party began, the hall buzzing with applause and soft music. Isabella stood up among the crowd, raised her wine glass, and spoke sweetly into the microphone. "I am so honored to inherit my husband's family legacy, and I promise to lead Casa de Sol to the top of the world." Those false words made me clench my fists until they hurt. I looked at Miller and he nodded, his gaze sharp. "It's time," he said gravely. The master of ceremonies on stage continued enthusiastically. "And now let's give a warm welcome to the new owner of Casa de Sol." The crowd erupted in applause, the stage lights illuminating the podium where Isabella was preparing to ascend. But just at that moment, as she stood up, her proud smile not yet fully formed, Miller gave me the signal. I took a deep breath, opened the car door, and got out. Julian was right behind me, his steps firm, like a declaration of war. I wore a simple black dress, my silver hair pulled back, but my eyes burned with an unbreakable determination. When I walked into the hall, the entire room fell silent. Murmurs began to spread like waves breaking on the shore. "Is that Maria? Wasn't she dead?" Someone whispered. "Isn't Isabella supposed to be the new owner?" "What's going on?" another voice asked. Isabella's face, just a few feet away from me, turned as pale as paper. The weighing glass in her hand dropped to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces with a crash that tore through the silence. She stumbled backward, her eyes wide with terror, stammering, "No, it can't be. You were dead." I lifted my head and walked straight toward the stage, each step crushing her lies. Julian was at my side, his gaze fixed on Isabella like a hunter on its prey. I stopped at the podium, took the microphone, and in a firm voice that resonated throughout the hall, I said, "That's right. I am the true owner of Casa de Sol. I am not dead, as my daughter-in-law claimed. And today, the truth will not die either." The crowd held its breath, the flashes from the journalists' cameras blinking non-stop, capturing the moment I knew would change everything. At that exact instant, Miller walked in, followed by 2 uniformed police officers. He held up the arrest warrant and declared in a clear, authoritative voice, "Isabella, you are under arrest for the attempted murder of your husband and mother-in-law, and as the prime suspect in the death of Mr. Albert." The entire hall erupted in shocked murmurs. Isabella screamed, her voice breaking, "I'm innocent! You have no proof!" But as the 2 officers moved forward and handcuffed her right there, in front of hundreds of witnesses, she had no way to deny it. Miller leaned toward me and whispered, Her parents were just arrested trying to flee. My team just informed me. I nodded, feeling a massive weight lift from my chest. I turned to Julian and squeezed his shoulder. He smiled, a smile filled with both pain and relief. "We did it, Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. The auditorium was still in chaos. Journalists swarmed us, firing questions, but I didn't answer. I just stood there watching Isabella being led away, her hair disheveled, her eyes wild with no trace of pride left. That image, while giving me some satisfaction, also left a scar on my heart. She had been my daughter-in-law, a woman I had loved like a daughter, but she chose the path of betrayal and now had to pay the price. The war wasn't over, but I knew the charade had finally come to an end. A few months later, the trial was held in a tense atmosphere, drawing intense public attention. The large courtroom in Austin was packed. Journalists with cameras and notebooks, old friends of mine and Albert's, and even partners who had once worked with Casa de Sol. Everyone wanted to witness the moment the truth would be revealed. Isabella sat in the defendant's chair, looking gaunt and pitiful, with no trace of the haughty demeanor that had once made me believe she was the perfect daughter-in-law. Her hair was tangled, her eyes swollen, and her gaze was downcast, as if she wanted to escape the hundreds of eyes fixed on her. The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with a sharp voice, began to lay out the case. He presented one piece of irrefutable evidence after another. The recording of Isabella calling her parents, coldly discussing the plan to kill me and Julian. The piece of paper torn from her notebook with the scribbled phrase, "The brakes are weak. All it takes is one hard press." The sweet, fake messages she had sent me, inviting me on a hiking trip. The prosecutor read one of them aloud. "Mom, I found a beautiful spot in the Grand Canyon. You're going to love it." Hearing those words again, I felt my heart tighten, as if it were being squeezed. The testimony of my neighbor, Mrs. Davis, revealed Isabella's deception even further. She stood up in court, her voice trembling but firm. I saw Maria, Julian, and Isabella leaving with suitcases. Maria even waved goodbye cheerfully and told me they were going on a family trip. But when they came back, I only saw Isabella. She told me Maria and Julian had been in an accident. The courtroom murmured, and all eyes turned to Isabella, who hung her head, not daring to look up. The testimony of old Matthew, the man who rescued us from the bottom of the canyon, was the final blow. He took the stand, thin but with a bright gaze. "I found them in critical condition," he recounted in a grave, sad voice. "They were lying in the grass, covered in blood, but still alive. I don't know who pushed them, but I do know that if I hadn't arrived in time, they wouldn't be here today." I watched him, silent tears streaming down my face. That lonely man, with a noble heart, had given Julian and me a second chance to claim justice. When the prosecutor finished his presentation, Isabella burst into tears, falling to her knees in front of the stand. I didn't want to do it," she sobbed, her voice broken. "It was my parents who forced me. My family was in debt. The creditors were threatening to kill us all. I had to do it," she recounted, trembling. That the initial plan was to kill both me and Albert in the brake accident to inherit the assets, and then get rid of Julian in a supposed hiking accident. But that morning, I was sick, and only Albert got in the car, which threw off the plan. "I didn't want to kill Dad," she screamed through her tears. But after he died, I had no way out. I had to keep going. I planned to get rid of Maria first on the trip, and then Julian a few months later to get everything. I knew if I did it all at once, it would look suspicious. So I spaced it out. She cried as she made excuses. "It was all because my parents told me to. They forced me. I had no other choice." But the prosecutor immediately retorted, his voice cold and cutting. "You were the mastermind, Isabella. You were the one who directly tampered with Mr. Albert's brakes. You pushed Maria and Julian off the cliff. No one forced you to pull the trigger. You chose this path." The crowd in the courtroom erupted in indignant murmurs. I looked at Isabella and no longer felt hatred but a deep sadness. She was once my daughter-in-law. She once held my hand and promised to care for me like her own mother. But now, she was just a stranger, buried under her own lies and crimes. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a stern expression, listened to every word. After deliberating, she stood up and, in a firm voice that echoed through the hall, declared, "Isabella, for the crimes of attempted murder and premeditated murder, you are sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Your parents, as accomplices, will also receive their due sentences." The bang of the gavel was final and cold, a declaration that justice had been served. Isabella screamed, collapsed, and was dragged out of the courtroom in handcuffs by 2 officers. The crowd stood up, some clapping, others shaking their heads with looks of mixed pity and disgust. I just stood there, looking around, seeing familiar faces, friends, Albert's old colleagues, people who had watched Casa de Sol grow from a small dream. They all looked at me with empathetic eyes, wanting to share the burden of pain I had carried. Julian placed his hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "Dad can rest in peace now, Mom." Those words brought tears to my eyes, but this time, they weren't tears of suffering, but of profound relief. I squeezed my son's hand tightly, felt his warmth, and knew we had fulfilled Albert's wish to protect our family, to protect his legacy. As we left the courthouse, the sun was shining brightly, with a strange warmth, as if Albert himself was smiling down on us from somewhere far away. I lifted my face, took a deep breath, and whispered, "Albert, justice is finally here." I felt he was there, watching over us, and I knew he would be proud of my strength and Julian's. We walked out together, mother and son, our shadows merging in the sunlight, as if we were stepping into a new chapter, one without the darkness of betrayal, only truth and hope. Looking back on everything, I understood that life always holds dark corners you can't predict, and that sometimes the people we trust the most are the ones who cause the greatest pain. But I also learned that from the abyss of despair, you discover that true strength lies in the courage to never give up and in the bond of blood that never betrays. The lesson I want to leave with you, who has followed my story to this point, is this: never blindly place all your trust in a sweet facade. Listen to your intuition and hold on to your faith in justice. Only by facing the truth, however painful it may be, can we protect our families and the values we cherish most. The story you have just heard has been modified in names and locations to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell it to judge, but in the hope that someone might listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you dare to confront it all, to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for others. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. For now, on the end screen, I'll leave 2 of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.